The thing about being underestimated is that it gets old fast, real fast. And Fiona was already tired of it, and she hadn't even finished her first shift rotation yet. Outpost Helios 9 hung in the black like a rusted crown, all jutting spires and industrial grime, orbiting an asteroid field so dense it looked like someone had shattered a planet and forgotten to clean up the mess. The Galactic Mining Consortium had built the facility to extract ultra-dense metamorphic ore, the kind of stuff that made starship hulls and planetary defense grids possible. It was dirty work, dangerous work, and it paid well enough that species from across known space showed up to do it. Humans, though. Humans were new to this party. 15 months. That's how long it had been since first contact, since humanity stumbled out of its little corner of the galaxy and realized, oh hey, we're not alone. And also we're apparently the cosmic equivalent of porcelain dolls in a universe full of sledgehammers. Fiona stepped off the transport shuttle and into the main hangar of Helios 9, her boots clanging against metal grating that had seen better decades. The air smelled like ozone and industrial lubricant, and the gravity felt just slightly off, like someone had dialed it to 0.9 and called it close enough. She carried a single duffel bag and a data tablet, looking for all the world like someone who'd wandered into the wrong building and was too polite to ask for directions. She was 34, average height for a human woman, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her. Which was fine. Fiona had never needed to be memorable. She just needed to be good at her job. "You're the human?" The voice came from above and to the left, chittering and clicking in a way that made Fiona's translator implant work overtime to render it into something resembling English. She looked up. Kulmex hung from an overhead support beam, his 6 limbs gripping the metal with casual ease. He was insectoid, all chitinous plates and compound eyes, about the size of a large dog if that dog had been stretched out and given too many joints. His exoskeleton gleamed a deep purple black under the hangar lights. "I'm Fiona," she said, keeping her voice level. "Structural engineer. I'm assigned to—" "Yes, yes, I read the manifest." Kulmex dropped from the beam, landing with a heavy thunk that would have shattered human ankles. He scuttled closer, head tilting in that unsettling way that suggested his neck had more range of motion than vertebrates were meant to possess. "They said they were sending a human. I thought perhaps they were joking. You people are so soft." Fiona had heard variations of this approximately 30 times since leaving Earth. She smiled politely. "I assure you, I'm qualified for the position." Qualified, perhaps. Durable? Kulmex's mandibles clicked in what her translator interpreted as laughter. "We shall see. Come, I'll show you to your quarters. Try not to break anything on the way, including yourself." Oh, this was going to be fun. The tour of Helios 9 was less a tour and more a running commentary on all the ways Fiona was probably going to die. The corridors were too cold for humans, except when they were too hot. The pressure differentials between sectors would rupture human eardrums if she wasn't careful. The radiation shielding was rated for most species, but humans, well, humans had that whole cancer problem, didn't they? So fragile, so delicate. Kulmex introduced her to the rest of the primary crew in the operations center, a large circular room dominated by holographic displays showing the asteroid field and the station's various extraction operations. Uxfar, the safety officer, was reptilian and massive, easily 8 feet tall when he stood at his full height. His scales were a mottled green-gray, and his eyes were the color of old amber. He regarded Fiona with something that might have been concern, or might have been the way you'd look at a puppy that had wandered onto a highway. "A human," Uxfar said slowly, his voice a deep rumble. "I have read about your species. You require very specific environmental conditions to survive, yes? Temperature, pressure, atmospheric composition." "We're adaptable," Fiona replied. "Adaptable," Uxfar repeated, like he was testing the word. "Your bones are calcium-based, not carbon-reinforced. Your skin has no natural armor. You have no redundant organs. You can die from simple bacterial infections." "We invented antibiotics," Fiona pointed out. "Because you needed to," Colmex interjected, mandibles clicking again. "Your own planet tries to kill you constantly. What kind of death world produces a species so vulnerable?" Fiona didn't answer, mostly because she didn't have a good answer. Earth was a death world, that much was true. The galactic community had been horrified when they'd seen the survey data. Extreme temperature swings, aggressive microbiology, weather patterns that could level cities, tectonic activity. And humans had not only survived there, they'd thrived. But looking at human physiology on paper, it didn't make sense. Humans were soft, squishy. They broke easily. The galaxy had noticed. Horth, the geologist, didn't even look up from their workstation when Fiona was introduced. Horth was crystalline, their body a complex lattice of translucent mineral structures that refracted light in dizzying patterns. They communicated through vibrations that Fiona's implant rendered as a flat, emotionless monotone. "Human," Horth said, acknowledged. "Do not touch my equipment. Your body temperature fluctuates too much. It will throw off my calibrations." "Noted," Fiona said. Colmex gestured to the holographic displays. "This is the heart of Helios 9. We extract ore from the asteroid field using a combination of precision plasma cutting and high-pressure hydraulic systems. The ore is ultra-dense, some of the hardest material in known space. We process it here, then ship it to manufacturing facilities across the sector." Fiona studied the displays, her engineer's mind already cataloging structural load points, potential failure vectors, safety margins. "What's the primary support structure made of?" "Titanium carbide alloy, reinforced with molecular bonding," Uxfar answered. "Rated to withstand 800 tons of pressure per support beam. We do not compromise on structural integrity." "Good," Fiona said. "Neither do I." Colmex's mandibles clicked again. "We shall see how long you last, human. Most of your kind request transfer within the first month. Too harsh, too dangerous, too uncomfortable." Fiona met his compound eyes without flinching. "I'm not most of my kind." "They all say that," Colmex replied. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Fiona did her job, and she did it well. She ran structural analyses, optimized load distributions, identified potential failure points before they became actual failures. She was good at her job. She'd always been good at her job. But the comments never stopped. In the mess hall, she'd overhear conversations about human fragility. Did you know they can die from falling down? Just falling. Their bones snap like dried twigs. And their skin, you could puncture it with a writing stylus. Unbelievable. How did they even make it to space? In the corridors, crew members would give her a wide berth, like she was made of glass, and might shatter if they breathed too hard in her direction. Colmex, to his credit, stopped making overt comments after the first week. But Fiona could see it in the way he double-checked her work, the way he assigned her to lower-risk tasks, the way he treated her like an intern instead of a qualified engineer. Uxfar was more direct. "I worry about you," he told her one day in the operations center. Your species is not meant for this environment. Perhaps a transfer to a research station would be more suitable? Somewhere safer? I'm fine, Fiona said. You say that, but your medical file indicates you have already requested additional heating in your quarters, supplemental vitamin supplements, and increased ration allocations. Your body is struggling. My body is adjusting, Fiona corrected. There's a difference. Uxfar's amber eyes studied her. I have seen the statistics. Humans have the highest injury rate of any species in the consortium, the highest medical claims, the highest transfer requests. You are not built for this work. Fiona took a slow breath. With respect, Uxfar, statistics don't tell the whole story. They tell enough, he replied. 3 weeks into her rotation, Fiona was running a routine structural inspection in Sector 12 when she heard it. A sound that every engineer dreads, the kind of sound that turns your blood to ice and your brain into overdrive. Metal screaming. Not bending. Not flexing. Screaming. She was moving before her conscious mind caught up, her boots pounding against the deck plating as she sprinted toward the source. Her comm implant crackled to life. All personnel, emergency alert. Hydraulic failure in Sector 12. Extraction Bay 4. Repeat, hydraulic failure. Evacuate immediately. Fiona didn't evacuate. She ran toward it. The extraction bay was chaos. Alarms blared. Red emergency lighting strobed across the massive space, and in the center of it all, one of the primary hydraulic presses had torn itself apart. Fluid sprayed in thick black arcs, and the support beam, that beautiful titanium carbide alloy beam rated for 800 tons, had bent like someone had taken a giant invisible hand and twisted it. And beyond that beam, in the section it was supposed to be supporting, Fiona could see movement. Crew members. Trapped. Her comm crackled again. Sector 12 is compromised. Life support failure in the trapped zone. Oxygen supply limited. All rescue personnel to staging area. Fiona's mind raced, calculating angles, stress points, load distributions. The beam had to be straightened. Had to be. If it wasn't, the entire section would collapse, and everyone inside would be crushed or suffocated, whichever came first. She tapped her comm. This is Fiona. I'm in Sector 12. How many trapped? 12 crew members. Uxfar's voice came back, tight with stress. Including Coolmex. Fiona, evacuate now. The structure is unstable. How long do they have? A pause. 40 minutes of oxygen, maybe less. What's the plan? We're bringing in heavy machinery to stabilize the beam, but it will take time to maneuver it into position. 90 minutes, minimum. 90 minutes. 40 minutes of air. The math didn't work. Fiona stared at the bent beam, her mind turning over possibilities, discarding them, finding new ones. Portable hydraulic tools? Too slow to set up. Plasma cutters? Too risky. Might compromise the structure further. Manual manipulation? Impossible. The alloy required thousands of pounds of force to bend. Thousands of pounds. Her comm crackled. Fiona, I'm reading your vital signs. Your heart rate is elevated. You need to evacuate. Now. She didn't respond. She was too busy staring at her hands. Soft hands. Weak hands. Human hands. Fiona smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been underestimated one too many times and was about to make a point. Uxfar, she said into her comm, her voice calm. I need you to pull up the structural data on that beam. Exact composition, current temperature, and the precise angle of deformation. Why? Fiona, what are you? Just do it, please. A pause, then data flooded her tablet. She studied it, her smile widening. Fiona, Uxfar said slowly. What are you planning? She set down her tablet, rolled her shoulders, stretched her fingers. Something stupid, she said. Or something brilliant. Honestly, it could go either way. And then she started walking toward the beam. The thing about adrenaline is that it's a liar. A beautiful, useful, absolutely insane liar that convinces your body it can do things that should be physically impossible. Fiona had read the studies back on Earth, the cases of parents lifting cars off trapped children, of people breaking down doors that should have required battering rams, of human bodies temporarily overriding every safety limit evolution had carefully installed. Hysterical strength, they called it. Emergency override, the body's last-ditch effort to survive. Fiona had never needed it before. She'd lived a pretty calm life, all things considered. Engineering school, a few years working on orbital construction projects, then the application to the consortium. No car accidents, no burning buildings, no moments of desperate, impossible need. Until now. Fiona, stop. Uxfar's voice in her comm was sharp, commanding. You are walking toward a structural collapse zone. Return to safe distance immediately. She kept walking. The bent beam loomed ahead, a massive curve of alloy that had been straight an hour ago. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. The kind of beauty that came from watching something strong break. Fiona, I am ordering you to evacuate. Noted, she said, and kept walking. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She'd expected them to shake, expected fear to kick in and make her reconsider this absolutely unhinged plan. But they were steady, and her breathing was even, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a little voice was saying, "This is the dumbest thing you've ever done." And another voice, louder, was saying, "But what if it works?" She reached the beam. Up close, it was even more massive than it had looked from a distance. The alloy was warm under her palm, still radiating heat from the hydraulic failure. She could feel the molecular structure through her fingertips, could almost sense the stress points where the metal had been forced past its tolerance. Fiona. Colmex's voice now, crackling through the comm from the trapped section. What are you doing? My job, she said simply. Your job is not to commit suicide by structural collapse. Good thing that's not what I'm doing, then. She positioned herself at the optimal leverage point, the place where the beam had bent most severely. Her boots found purchase on the deck plating. Her hands gripped the alloy, fingers spreading wide to distribute pressure. In the operations center, she knew, they were watching her on security feeds, probably thinking she'd lost her mind, probably already writing the incident report. Human engineer suffers psychological break. Attempts to manually manipulate support beam, dies instantly when structural integrity fails. Cause of death. Stupidity. Fiona took a breath. Then another. Then a third, deep and slow, filling her lungs completely. And then she pushed. Nothing happened. Well, that wasn't quite true. Her muscles engaged, her tendons pulled taut, her bones provided leverage. But the beam didn't move, didn't even flex. It just sat there, bent and immovable, mocking her. Fiona, please, Uxfar said, and there was something in his voice that might have been genuine concern. You cannot move that beam. It requires 12,000 pounds of force. You are human. You are not capable of... She pushed harder. Her heart rate spiked. She could feel it hammering against her ribs, feel her blood pressure climbing, feel every muscle fiber in her arms and shoulders and back and legs firing in concert. The human body, she'd learned in school, typically only uses about 30% of its muscle capacity during normal activity. Safety margin. Protection against tearing tendons, snapping bones, destroying itself in pursuit of a goal. But that safety margin could be overridden. The beam shifted. Just a fraction of an inch, barely perceptible, but Fiona felt it. Felt the alloy begin to yield under her hands. In the operations center, someone made a sound that the translator couldn't quite render. Shock, maybe. Disbelief. Fiona gritted her teeth and pushed harder. Her vision started to narrow at the edges, her body redirecting blood flow to essential systems. Her hands ached, then burned, then went past burning into something that felt like her palms were being flayed. She could feel her muscles tearing microscopically, feel her bones creaking under the load, feel every nerve ending screaming at her to stop. Stop. You're going to break yourself. Stop. She didn't stop. The beam moved. Slowly, impossibly, the alloy began to bend back toward its original position. Inch by inch, degree by degree, Fiona forced the metal to obey. That's not possible, Horth's flat monotone came through the comm. Human muscle tissue cannot generate sufficient force. The mathematics do not support this. Tell that to the beam, Fiona gasped out, and pushed harder still. Her hands were bleeding now. She could feel it, warm and slick against the alloy. Her shoulders felt like they were being pulled out of their sockets. Her legs trembled with the effort of keeping her stable, of providing a foundation for the force she was generating. But the beam was moving. In the trapped section, Kulmex had gone silent. The entire comm channel had gone silent, actually. Everyone was watching, and no one knew what to say. Fiona's world had narrowed to three things: the beam, her hands, and the burning need to move one with the other. Nothing else existed. Not the pain, not the impossibility, not the voices in her head saying, "This will kill you." Maybe it would, but 12 people would live. The math worked now. She pushed, and the beam bent, and somewhere in her body, something gave way. She felt it pop, felt a tendon or ligament or something decide it had had enough. Her left shoulder erupted in white-hot agony. Fiona screamed, not a scream of defeat, but of rage, of defiance, of a human body being pushed past every reasonable limit and deciding that reasonable was for people who weren't trying to save lives. And the beam snapped back into position. Not perfect, not exactly where it had been before the failure, but close enough, stable enough. The structure stopped groaning, stopped threatening to collapse. Fiona let go and staggered backward, her legs barely holding her upright. Her hands were a mess, blood dripping from torn skin. Her left arm hung at a wrong angle. Her entire body shook like she'd been electrocuted. But the beam was straight. Structural integrity restored, Horth's voice said, emotionless as ever. Rescue teams can now safely enter the compromised section. Fiona heard boots on deck plating, heard voices shouting orders, heard the organized chaos of a rescue operation kicking into high gear. She slid down against a wall, her legs finally giving out, and sat there watching her blood drip onto the floor. Her comm crackled. Fiona. Uxfar's voice was strange, tight. Medical team is en route to your position. Do not move. Wasn't planning on it, she mumbled. What you just did was... He trailed off. I do not have words. Stupid, Fiona offered. Reckless, medically inadvisable. Impossible, Uxfar said quietly. You did something impossible. Fiona laughed, and it hurt, and she didn't care. Yeah, well, humans are good at that. The rescue took 20 minutes. They pulled all 12 crew members out of the compromised section, alive and uninjured. Kulmex emerged last, his compound eyes immediately finding Fiona where she sat against the wall. He scuttled over, moving with uncharacteristic hesitation. "You bent the beam." "Yep." "With your hands?" "Yep." "That should not be possible." Fiona looked up at him, at this insectoid foreman who'd spent 3 weeks treating her like she was made of spun sugar and wishful thinking. "You know what you said about humans being soft?" Colmex's mandibles twitched. "Yes. You were right. We are soft. Compared to most species, we're fragile as hell. Our bones break, our skin tears. We die from things that wouldn't even slow you down." She held up her ruined hands. "But soft doesn't mean weak, and fragile doesn't mean helpless. You forgot to ask the important question. Which is? How did something so fragile survive on a death world?" Fiona smiled, blood on her teeth. "The answer is, we got really, really good at not dying, even when we should." The medical team arrived then, and Fiona let them fuss over her, let them scan her with instruments that beeped disapprovingly at her vital signs. But she kept her eyes on Colmex, watched him process what he'd just witnessed, watched him realize that maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about humans. The medical bay on Helios 9 smelled like antiseptic and something vaguely floral that Fiona's translator implant unhelpfully identified as calming pheromones for species group 4B. Humans were not species group 4B. The smell just made her nauseous. Dr. Fex loomed over her, all 6 feet of amphibious bulk, her skin a mottled pattern of blue and green that shifted colors based on her mood. Right now, she was cycling through shades that Fiona's implant translated as concerned, baffled, and mildly horrified. "Explain to me again," Fex said, her voice bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest, "how you are not dead." Fiona sat on the examination table, her hands wrapped in regenerative bandages that hummed softly as they worked. Her left shoulder had been relocated, stabilized, and was currently being held together by a combination of medical gel and what Fex had called optimistic thinking. "I bent a beam. We covered this. You bent an alloy beam rated to withstand 800 tons of pressure. With your hands. Your soft, calcium-based, entirely inadequate hands." Fex's skin flashed a color that the implant rendered as existential confusion. "I have your medical scan results. Do you know what they show? That I need a vacation? Muscle tears, extensive muscle tears, ligament damage, tendon strain, microfractures in both radius and ulna bones. Your left rotator cuff is partially detached. You have elevated stress hormones, depleted electrolytes, and your body temperature spiked to levels that should have caused neural damage." Fex leaned closer, her large eyes unblinking. "And yet, you are sitting here, conscious, coherent, and making jokes. Any other species would be in critical care. Most would be dead." Fiona shrugged with her good shoulder. "Humans are hard to kill." "Evidently." Fex manipulated a holographic display, pulling up comparative anatomy charts. "I have been studying your species since you arrived. The medical literature describes humans as fragile, prone to injury, requiring extensive environmental controls. But this," she gestured at Fiona, "this does not match the literature." "Maybe the literature is incomplete," Fiona suggested. "Or, perhaps," Uxfar's voice rumbled from the doorway, "we have been asking the wrong questions." The safety officer ducked through the entrance, his massive frame barely fitting through the medical bay door. He carried a data tablet and wore an expression that Fiona was learning to recognize as his "I have been researching, and now I am concerned" face. "I have been reviewing Earth's biological survey data. Uxfar continued, moving to stand beside Fex. The initial reports focused on human vulnerabilities, lack of natural armor, susceptibility to disease, limited environmental tolerance. But I decided to examine the data from a different angle. Which is? Fex asked. Survival mechanisms. Uxfar pulled up a holographic display. Earth is classified as a Class 9 death world. Extreme temperature variations, aggressive microbiology, high tectonic activity, dangerous megafauna. Most species that evolve on such worlds develop physical defenses, armor plating, venom, size, speed. Humans developed none of these. We noticed, Fiona said dryly. Instead, Uxfar continued, humans developed something more insidious. Adaptability. Your species can survive in temperature ranges that would kill most life forms. You can consume and digest an absurd variety of organic matter. Your immune system is… He paused, searching for words. Aggressive. Violently aggressive. It attacks threats with such ferocity that it sometimes damages your own body in the process. Autoimmune disorders, Fiona confirmed. Yeah, our immune system is kind of paranoid. And then there is this. Uxfar highlighted a section of data. Your muscular system. Human muscles are not particularly strong compared to other species of similar size. But they have an unusual property. Under extreme stress, your body can temporarily disable its own safety limiters. Fex's skin flashed bright orange. That is suicidal. Safety limiters exist to prevent self-destruction. For most species, yes, Uxfar agreed, but humans evolved on a world where sometimes self-destruction was preferable to being destroyed by something else. Your bodies learned to make that calculation. Tear a muscle now, or be eaten by a predator. Break a bone now, or fall to your death. Damage yourself now, or watch your offspring die. Fiona felt something twist in her chest. She'd never thought about it that way. Never considered that her body's ability to push past pain, past exhaustion, past every screaming warning sign was a feature, not a bug. A survival mechanism honed over millions of years of living on a planet that wanted her ancestors dead. There is a term in your medical literature, Uxfar said quietly. Hysterical strength. The ability of humans to perform feats of strength far beyond their normal capacity during life-threatening situations. Mothers lifting vehicles off trapped children. Individuals breaking through doors or moving debris that should require machinery. It is documented, repeatable, and entirely unique to your species. How unique? Fex asked. I have found no equivalent in any other known species. Most biological systems cannot override their safety limiters without external chemical intervention. Humans do it naturally, instinctively, when the situation demands it. Uxfar looked at Fiona. You bent that beam because your body decided that bending the beam was more important than preserving itself. It made a choice. I made a choice, Fiona corrected. Did you? Uxfar tilted his head. Or did millions of years of evolution make it for you? Did your conscious mind decide to risk permanent injury? Or did your hindbrain, the ancient part that remembers running from predators and fighting for survival, simply take over and do what needed to be done? Fiona didn't have an answer for that. She remembered the moment, remembered the decision to push. But the actual act of bending the beam was fuzzy, like her body had been on autopilot, running programs written long before she was born. There is more, Uxfar continued. Human bone structure. Your bones are not as dense as most species, but they are designed for impact absorption. They flex before they break. Your tendons and ligaments have redundant attachment points. Your skeletal system is optimized for leverage and tool use. You are not built to be strong. You are built to use strength efficiently. Persistence hunters, Fiona murmured. That's what the anthropologists called us. We didn't outrun our prey. We just kept following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. And then you killed it with tools, HFY said. Because you were smart enough to realize that you did not need to be the strongest predator. You just needed to be the most stubborn. Fex's skin had cycled through several colors and settled on a pale green that the implant translated as thoughtful. This explains much. The injury rates, the medical claims, the constant environmental complaints. We have been treating humans as fragile because you appear fragile. But you are not fragile. You are, what is the word? Expendable. I prefer resilient, Fiona said. You damage easily but repair quickly, Fex continued, warming to the topic. Your healing factor is remarkable. Broken bones knit in weeks, torn muscles regenerate. Even your skin, which seems so vulnerable, can heal from extensive damage with minimal scarring. You are designed to be injured and survive. We're designed to take a beating and keep going, Fiona agreed. It's kind of our thing. The medical bay door opened again, and Kulmex scuttled in, his movements uncharacteristically hesitant. He'd been quiet since the rescue, and Fiona had assumed he was processing. Turned out she was right. I owe you an apology, Kulmex said without preamble. I have spent 3 weeks treating you as incompetent, because I believed you were fragile. I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong, Fiona pointed out. I am fragile. Compared to you, compared to most species here, I'm made of tissue paper and hope. But you bent the beam. Yeah. How? Kulmex moved closer, his compound eyes studying her with new intensity. I have been running calculations. The force required, the leverage, the structural stress. Even accounting for optimal positioning and technique, you should not have been able to move that alloy. Your muscle mass is insufficient. Your skeletal structure is inadequate. The mathematics do not work. The mathematics don't account for desperation, Fiona said. Or adrenaline. Or the fact that 12 people were going to die if I didn't at least try. So you simply decided to do the impossible? Pretty much, yeah. Kulmex's mandibles clicked, but this time it didn't sound like laughter. It sounded like respect. I have worked with hundreds of species across dozens of stations. I have never seen anything like what you did. Most beings, when faced with an impossible task, accept the impossibility. They wait for proper equipment, for backup, for someone else to solve the problem. You just did it. Because I had to, Fiona said simply. That's the thing about humans. We're really good at doing things we have to do, even when we shouldn't be able to. Your species survived a death world not by being the strongest or the fastest, HFY said, but by being too stubborn to die. And too stupid to know when to quit, Fiona added with a tired smile. Fex made a bubbling sound that might have been laughter. I am updating the human medical protocols. Clearly, our current understanding is insufficient. If one human can bend alloy beams, what else are your species capable of? Honestly, Fiona looked at her bandaged hands. I have no idea. We're still figuring that out ourselves. 15 months ago, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now we're out here bending metal and confusing doctors. Give us a few years. We'll probably surprise you again. I do not doubt it, HFY said quietly. Kulmex scuttled toward the door, then paused. Fiona, when you are healed, I would like to properly train you on the heavy equipment. I believe I have been underutilizing your capabilities. I'd like that, Fiona said. After they left, Fex continued her examination, muttering to herself about human physiology and impossible feats. Fiona let her mind wander, thinking about Earth, about evolution, about the long chain of ancestors who'd survived impossible odds to get her here. Soft, yeah. Fragile, absolutely. But humans had survived ice ages and plagues and predators and each other. They'd walked out of Africa and spread across a hostile planet, adapting to every environment, overcoming every obstacle. Bending one alloy beam? That was nothing. That was just Tuesday. Except it wasn't, because Fiona had just remembered she wasn't supposed to think about days of the week, and now she was too tired to care. 6 weeks later, Fiona stood in the operations center watching a cargo manifest scroll across her display, and the universe felt different. Not physically different. The station still hummed with the same industrial rhythm, still smelled like ozone and lubricant, still had gravity that felt just slightly wrong. But the atmosphere had changed. The way people looked at her had changed. The way they looked at all humans had changed. Word had spread. Of course it had. You can't have a human engineer manually bend a support beam and expect that story to stay contained. It had rippled out through the consortium network like a shockwave, getting embellished and exaggerated with each retelling until Fiona had heard a version where she'd apparently lifted an entire section of the station with her bare hands while fighting off a plasma fire. She'd tried to correct that one. Nobody believed her. "Morning, Fiona," Uxfar rumbled, ducking into the operations center. He carried 2 containers of what passed for coffee on Helios 9. He'd started bringing her one every shift. She hadn't asked him to. He just did. "Morning," she replied, accepting the container. The coffee was terrible, but it was caffeinated, and that was what mattered. "I have been reviewing the incident reports from other consortium facilities," Uxfar said, pulling up a holographic display. "There have been interesting developments." "Oh?" Outpost Meridian 6 reported that a human technician repaired a critical coolant leak by holding the damaged pipe together with his hands for 40 minutes, while the system cycled down. The pipe temperature was hot enough to cause third-degree burns. He held it anyway. Fiona winced. "That's going to scar?" He returned to duty 3 weeks later, full recovery. Uxfar scrolled through more reports. Station Kepler 88 had a human security officer who subdued an intoxicated Corthian, a species that outweighs humans by a factor of 3 and has natural armor plating. She used what the report calls leverage and applied joint manipulation. The Corthian required medical attention. She did not. "Sounds like she knew martial arts," Fiona said. "Humans have been figuring out how to fight bigger opponents for thousands of years. You learn to use physics instead of strength." "And here," Uxfar continued, "mining platform Osiris-12 reports a human geologist who fell 6 meters onto solid rock. Fractured ribs, collapsed lung, internal bleeding. He stabilized himself, called for help, and remained conscious until medical arrived. He is expected to make full recovery." "Expected being the key word," Fiona pointed out. "We're tough, not invincible." "The pattern is clear, though," Uxfar said. "Humans are being underestimated across the consortium. We see your vulnerabilities and assume weakness. We do not see your adaptations." "To be fair, we didn't advertise them," Fiona said. "The first contact team was probably trying to seem non-threatening. Hard to do that when you're explaining that humans can temporarily override pain, ignore injuries that would incapacitate other species, and have a documented history of surviving things that should absolutely kill them. Perhaps honesty would have been preferable to diplomacy." "Maybe," Fiona sipped her terrible coffee. "But would you have hired me if you'd known what humans were capable of?" Uxfar considered this. "I do not know. Fear can be as limiting as underestimation. The operations center door opened, and Kulmex scuttled in, followed by Horth's crystalline form refracting the overhead lights into rainbow patterns. They'd all fallen into a routine over the past weeks, a functional working relationship built on mutual respect instead of assumptions. "Fiona," Kulmex said, his mandibles clicking in what she'd learned was his version of a smile. "I have a task that requires your particular expertise." "Which is?" "We have a seized hydraulic coupling in Sector 8. It requires significant force to break free, but the space is too confined for heavy equipment. I estimate it needs approximately 800 pounds of rotational torque." Fiona raised an eyebrow. "And you want me to?" "Apply human stubbornness to the problem," Kulmex said. "I have learned that this is often more effective than proper tools." She laughed. "I'll take a look. But I'm bringing proper tools as backup. I'm tough, not magic." "The distinction is becoming less clear," Horth observed in their flat monotone. The rest of the shift passed in comfortable productivity. Fiona had been promoted to Assistant Operations Manager 2 weeks ago, a position that came with more responsibility and significantly more respect. She'd earned it, not through bending metal, but through consistent competence and the kind of problem-solving that came from growing up on a planet that constantly tried to kill you. Humans, it turned out, were very good at creative solutions. When you couldn't rely on being the strongest or the fastest, you learned to be the smartest, or at least the most creative. Sometimes, those were the same thing. The shift was ending when the transport shuttle arrived. Fiona was reviewing the next rotation's schedule when Kulmex's voice crackled over the comm. "Fiona, you have a visitor." She looked up from her display. "A visitor?" "Family. According to the manifest, he is waiting in the hangar." Family. Fiona's heart did a complicated thing in her chest, somewhere between excitement and dread. She made her way to the hangar, her boots ringing against the deck plating, and found him standing next to his duffel bag, looking around with wide eyes. Liam was smaller than Fiona, which was saying something because Fiona wasn't particularly tall. He had the same dark hair, the same unremarkable features, the same tendency to look like he'd wandered into the wrong place. He was 26, worked as a structural specialist on lunar construction projects, and had apparently decided to transfer to Helios 9 without telling her. "Surprise!" he offered when he saw her. Fiona hugged him, careful of her still-healing shoulder. "You're an idiot. What are you doing here?" "Heard my big sister was out here bending metal and terrifying aliens. Figured I'd come see what all the fuss was about." He grinned. "Also, the pay is better than Luna. Significantly better." "The pay is hazard compensation," Fiona said. "Because it's hazardous." "I'm aware." Liam hefted his duffel. "So, where do I bunk?" Kulmex had followed Fiona to the hangar, and now he scuttled forward, studying Liam with his compound eyes. "Another human. You are Fiona's sibling?" "Liam," he said, extending a hand. "Structural specialist. Pleased to meet you." Kulmex regarded the offered hand with what might have been amusement. "I am Kulmex, operations foreman. I must warn you, your sister has set a very high standard for human performance. There are expectations now." "Oh, I'm aware," Liam said cheerfully. "She sent me the incident report. Very impressive. Though between you and me, I'm pretty sure I could have bent that beam faster." Fiona elbowed him. "Don't start." "What? I'm just saying. Competitive powerlifting, 3 years running. I've got at least 20 pounds of muscle on you. And I've got 6 years of experience and common sense, which you clearly lack." Kulmex's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You are both insane." This is a family trait? Pretty much, Fiona and Liam said in unison. Oxfar arrived then, ducking through the hangar entrance. He studied Liam with his amber eyes, and Fiona could practically see him running calculations, assessing threat levels, updating his understanding of human capabilities. "Another human," Oxfar said slowly. "How many of you are there?" "On Earth?" "About 11 billion, Liam said. "In the consortium?" "Maybe a few thousand so far, but we're expanding. Humans are good at that. Expanding, adapting, showing up in places and making them work." "I am beginning to understand this," Oxfar said. Kulmex gestured toward a cargo container sitting near the shuttle, the kind that usually required 2 of his species to move. "Liam, that container needs to be relocated to Storage Bay 3. Can you?" Liam walked over, assessed the container, found the handholds, and lifted. Not easily, not without effort, but he lifted it, carried it, set it down where Kulmex had indicated. The hangar went very quiet. "Right," Liam said, dusting off his hands. "What else needs moving?" Kulmex's mandibles had stopped clicking. Oxfar's amber eyes were very wide. Fiona tried not to smile and failed completely. "I believe," Oxfar said carefully, "that we need to revise our understanding of human capabilities. Again." "Probably," Fiona agreed. "We're still figuring ourselves out, honestly. 15 months in space isn't a lot of time to establish baselines." "How strong are humans?" Kulmex asked, and there was something in his voice that might have been concern, or might have been fascination, or might have been both. Fiona looked at her brother, thought about the beam she'd bent, thought about all the humans scattered across consortium space who were probably surprising their alien colleagues in similar ways, thought about Earth, about evolution, about millions of years of survival against impossible odds. "Strong enough," she said finally. "We're strong enough." And in the hangar of Outpost Helios 9, surrounded by species from across the galaxy, 2 humans stood and smiled, because they knew something the rest of the universe was just beginning to learn. Humans looked soft. Humans looked fragile. Humans looked like they shouldn't have survived their own planet, let alone made it to the stars. But looking soft and being weak were 2 very different things, and the galaxy was learning that lesson 1 bent alloy beam at a time.